wonder if this is gonna be something really big and epic. That's it. Almost there. Now, presenting another incredible ranking of every DreamWorks animated movie. Haha! That's made by an idiot. Woohoo! Hold the applause, everyone, please, please. Take that, depression. Well, despite all that life has thrown at me with going on dates, college, mental health inconveniences, elephants, exercising, and whatever the hell is going on in my life, I have finally made this video. To be fair, my announcement for this video was recently, but this video has been in the works since November 2023, give or take, and really has been an idea since the "Is DreamWorks better than Disney" video, because as I mentioned in that video, while I did grow up watching Disney and DreamWorks movies as a wee little lad, DreamWorks movies always stuck out to me more back then, and certainly now I feel like they had a much more pronounced effect on me, even to this very day. And so despite there already being several ranking every DreamWorks animated movie videos on YouTube, all of which I recommend checking out, I decided to throw my hat in the ring because I feel like this is the best way for me to talk about every single DreamWorks movie and the impact that they had on me in my life. Like most rankings, this is my personal opinion, and I guarantee that you are going to strongly disagree with at least one of my placements on here, so the sooner that you accept that, instead of typing in the comments about how I need to go bathe with a toaster, or I should try this new ceiling necklace that's very popular. To iterate, this is my subjective ranking, and while for the most part my enjoyment does usually coordinate with the quality of the film, but some of them, will say the less than stellar ones, are higher than others because I can at least laugh at how bad they are or how absurd the film is. With that pointless process of me setting up a little wall to try and protect myself from the angry comments, I give you every animated DreamWorks movie ranked. And the worst DreamWorks animated movie is number 46, Spirit Untamed. I'm gonna be honest, I watched this movie for the first time for this ranking because I did not want to watch it when it came out because for one, it looked bad, and the other, I'm clearly not the target audience for this film or the Netflix show that this took most of the inspiration from because I am not a 10-year-old girl. I knew I probably wasn't gonna be a fan of this movie for a lot of reasons, but even I was shocked at how bad this one was. Like, woof. I can't really think of any actually positive noteworthy elements of this film. The animation is serviceable most of the time, but even then, a lot of the facial expressions and movements feel very janky. For example, a lot of the comedic facial expressions feel like they are very restrained, which makes the comedy fall very flat and hitting the ground harder than Lucky's mom, which I had to look up the main character's name to remember it and realized how stupid it is to name your child Lucky. They should have named her Plot Convenience because whatever happens in this movie is solely at the convenience of her. Why would we show a scene that, you know, smoothly and naturally shows the amount of time it took Spirit in the original movie to trust people, when she can do it in like 3 days? Clearly Little Creek had no idea what he was doing. A 10-year-old girl is clearly the expert when it comes to gaining the trust of a wild animal. It might have been longer, but the film did such a terrible job of communicating it to the audience that it comes across as 3 days. So as far as I'm concerned, it was 3 days. That's another thing about this movie. As someone who has worked with wild animals, with many of them having very traumatic pasts involving people, I wish it was that easy. After her jumping on his back, that would have been the shattering of that bond, because animals tend to lose trust based on how much you are going to take out of the trust bank. They kind of go that route, but when she jumps on his back and rides him out of town, for an animal, that is a huge ask and violation, which I would bet would destroy most, if not all, the trust he did have with her. How's the voice acting? It's fine. I guess except when it's not. The story is very cliche and extremely predictable. The characters are equally boring and two-dimensional. None of the emotional moments hit because the pacing and build-up leading up to these emotional moments are so rushed and so forced because we have to empower the little girls. That is not a bad thing, they just do it very poorly in this movie. The most positive thing I can say about this film is that the landscape shots are very pretty, but even then it's kind of the standard quality we expect from modern animated movies. This film was able to get a visceral reaction out of me, which which is pretty impressive because not many of these did, so points for that, I guess. But worst of all, it's so boring, which is one of the worst things a movie can be. Honestly, I could go on and on about this movie, but just like the original film, this one was loosely based off. This one might get its own video one day, but until then, it can take solace in the fact that this is my least favorite DreamWorks movie by a significant amount. Here's your award movie. Now, excuse me, dear audience, while I take this film out behind the barn and put it down and turn it into glue and dog food. Number 45, Home.
I do not want it to work.
Hey, you know what? Boo rhymes with groove. Shake your boo thing.
Prior to watching Spirit Untamed, I was extremely confident that Home was going to remain at the bottom of my list, as I have stated at least once on this channel how this has always been my least favorite DreamWorks movie, until Spirit Untamed galloped into the worst spot, which part of that does have to do with it having a connection to a beloved property, which movies that have that corporate stench do comprise the majority of my least favorite films. So whenever an original movie makes it onto my shit list, you do have to give it props for it. I say original, but let's face it, this film was so clearly made to rip off the Minions, which have made Illumination $1 gazillion and will probably double that amount, so of course DreamWorks was gonna copy them because that's what DreamWorks does. Hey, am I right? I'm kidding. Before ripping Home a new one, is there anything I liked about this film? I mean, there's a couple funny jokes.
Before I got the password, I erased him.
There's one of Rihanna's songs that I kind of like out of context from the film, but in context it makes the emotional moments awkward and it just stands out like a redneck in Seattle. I also do like the little twist ending with the Gorg. I don't know, it's just a nice little emotional moment that works. It's simple. I like it. Screw off. Speaking of Rihanna, she is one of the main characters, and while a decent singer and musical performer, she's clearly not cut out for acting. Although her voice acting here, it's not nearly as egregious as she is in Valerian in the City of a Thousand Times I Bashed My Skull in while watching that atrocity. The rest of this film is so clearly targeted to little kids, and I mean like 2 to 3 year olds. The color palette, lots of soft and safe colors, fun squishy designs for the boob, extreme close-up camera shots that make you feel extremely uncomfortable, and the humor equivalent of jangling keys in front of a baby who still hasn't developed their prefrontal cortex. And for the worst part of the movie, Sheldon Cooper. The voice they had him makes me want to rip off my ears, put them in a box, and then put that box into another box, and then mail it to my front door, and then when it arrives, I'll smash it with a hammer! I guarantee the producers asked themselves, what's the most obnoxious voice that we could do that'll make kids laugh? And Sheldon Cooper came in and said, Bazinga! Honestly, I side with all the boob in hating him and wanting him to be erased because this guy is just the worst. If O was tolerable, this film wouldn't be so low, but he single-handedly brings it down so much that the rest of the film suffers for it. I also do not buy the friendship that these two form with them trying to betray one another and then all of a sudden they're besties. Tip has been shown to be this closed-off person that doesn't trust others very easily, which makes it more unbelievable that they would go from tying O up after he tries to leave her stranded to all of a sudden going to silly goofy dance party because it's been 5 minutes since the last Rihanna song. The plot is only moved forward by O's incompetence, which I just love when I get to watch a character make the literal worst decision possible in a situation because we have to make the movie somehow. Call the Helldivers because nothing would be a more pleasant Sunday family activity than to drop some freedom onto this film.
Launch initiated.
Give Daddy some sugar!
Number 44, Trolls World Tour.
The most important songs in the history of music.
Yes, but which ones?
All of them.
And when you say all of them.
Yo, I'll tell you.
I hate the fact that this film has cultural significance, with it being the first theatrical film to be available to rent on streaming services when COVID began, which seems like such a long time ago, but I'm getting sidetracked. Trolls 2 World Tour, in a word, is obnoxious, with Poppy being at her most unbearable of toxic positivity, refusing to listen to anyone else, and the irony that she beats the villain by not listening, which is so shockingly hilarious I kind of refuse to believe that a mistake like that didn't just slip by, and have to think it was intentional to some degree. It's basically the plot of Infinity War mixed with racial dominance and suppression of other races, and still has nothing of any value to say, or says it in the most superficial and boring way imaginable. There's also way too much James Corden in this film, and every second of him on screen is more agonizing than getting my balls hooked up to a car battery. The remaining elements of the story are so cliched and overdone, or just straight up copied from the first film, that you know exactly what's going to happen 30 minutes before it happens. Even the fun musical segments of the first one are gone. Granted, the first one they were about 50-50 on whether the musical scenes were fun or obnoxious, but the point still stands. Credit where credit is due, the film has one or two decent jokes, and the animation in the world is very creative, but ultimately it's such a forgettable film with a fairly unlikable protagonist. I say this one is better off with you hitting the skip button on this playlist. Number 43, Shark Tale. This is a disaster of a film, truly an enigma of how such a failed abortion of a film came to fruition. One could even call it a cinematic disaster. Okay, but this film is kind of awesome. When I was a kid, I got in trouble for waking up early and watching Shark Tale without my sister because I just couldn't bear to wait until she was done with her nap to watch the glory that is Will Smith fish and closeted gay shark.
Oh, snuggly, buggly, wuggly. I love you, man.
The movie is terrible. I mean, nothing is good. Not to mention extremely cringy, but gosh darn it, if it isn't one of the most entertaining films I've ever seen. And yes, while objectively, I would say this is the worst DreamWorks film, it's much more entertaining than most of the terrible films on this list. So while I am putting it at the bottom of the terrible films, it didn't get that visceral reaction out of me. So take solace, dear viewer, that the movie is easily one of DreamWorks' most entertaining movies. Number 42, Turbo.
Whoa, that snail is fast.
So get this, it's a movie about a snail that goes fast. How wacky is that? Because snails are like normally slow, but this one goes fast. So will you greenlight this film? What? It's a film about a snail that goes fast and not much more to say about this one. It's possibly the most generic animated kids movie ever with probably the worst DreamWorks villain. I like the race scene because everything go fast and burr, but that doesn't save this film from being so generic and dull, and that is all I have to say because it is so generic and dull. Number 41, Shrek 3.
Ah! Oh! Donkey! Donkey! Wake up! Ah! Ah!
Dada!
You know, if we take this film out from the Shrek trilogy, it's easily one of the best trilogies DreamWorks has produced. Shrek 3 on paper is not a bad idea to take the character of Shrek. I think him being worried about being a father, given him being an ogre, is very legitimate, and unlike other sequels to beloved trilogies, it feels like enough time has passed for this next big life change to be happening and doesn't feel rushed because we have to have a new character take up the mantle. Honestly, this film might age slightly better once all the internet people that love this franchise have kids of their own. But ideas are only as good as their execution, and this movie stumbles hard. Between the forced relationships of Arthur and Shrek, Prince Charming as a solo villain, who was hilariously awful, making him one of the worst DreamWorks villains, and most of the humor being reduced to poop and fart jokes because babies poop and fart a lot. Just like any bad sequel in a franchise of good movies, the bad one is always gonna be attacked a lot more because of those high expectations. And while I do dislike this film and think it is bad, it's not as bad as I remember it being rewatching this, and I do think Shrek 3 gets a little overhated. I say that as I put this in the bottom 6 DreamWorks films, so I guess my actions speak louder than words, so, you know, hypocrite. But I will say I do love one scene from this movie, which I'll put in here to end this portion, but while this one good scene doesn't save an otherwise mediocre movie, it still deserves to at least be acknowledged.
You know, it may be hard to believe, what with my obvious charm and good looks, but people used to think I was a monster. And for a long time, I believed them. But after a while, You learn to ignore the names that people call you, and you just trust who you are.
Number 40, Trolls.
Wait! I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. At least give him a chance.
Thank you, Poppy. I'm selling you out.
This is a good kids movie that'll entertain kids and has a couple of chuckle jokes and is a very creative, but god damn it, this is the epitome of what every modern day animated movie has become, and I blame this film for really getting it rolling, even though there is certainly other films that could be blamed. One thing that drives me crazy with characters are those that express toxic positivity because they are insufferable as they shove their view of life down everyone's throat, and they are almost always shown to be in the right. Case in point is Poppy, which granted she's not as bad in Trolls 2, but it's still very annoying. I've wasted enough time talking about this one, so skip! Number 39, The Boss Baby.
You're toast, baby man!
Upsies! Onion upsies!
I have a feeling this is gonna get me some slack, but this movie is like a more competently made Shark Tale. In the sense, it's not a very good movie at all, with Tim being one of the most insufferable child characters in a film that I can think of. Also, I just despise how soft the parents are in this movie, creating this monster of a spoiled child. The emotional moments aren't really earned because you don't believe the relationship between Tim and Donald Zuckerberg Gates Jr. with one of, if not the most forced third act breakup scene I've ever seen in a film, although Secret Life of Pets might have it beat.
My life was perfect until you showed up.
Oh, believe me, kid, the feeling is mutual. I wish I'd never met you.
I wish you'd never been born. Where are you going?
But both are so rushed and forced, it feels like the cinematic equivalent of a hernia. That being said, there's the fact that this is such an absurd fever dream of a movie that I can at least get enjoyment from that in a sense. I would say that this is also thoughtful commentary on how more of the younger generations are not interested in having babies and favoring having pets instead of this, but let's face it, proposing such an idea would be laughably futile, as this film is meant to be emotional and entertaining, and it is one of those things. I'll give you a hint, it's not the emotional one, and even the entertaining part is still debatable.
Ticklish, ticklish.
Here you go.
So, that's my story. Our story.
Number 38, Boss Baby, Family Business.
It's business, Leslie. Personal to me, Lindsay.
A slightly better version of the first one with a pretty funny self-dig.
It was a good story, wasn't it?
Well, it didn't really make a lot of sense.
The jokes were good, right?
And just as much as a fever dream as the first, but that's pretty much all I can say about this one without getting repetitive, so let's move on.
So even though you're only a kid once, well, unless you get to be a kid twice, which is really weird, to be honest, but the point is, you have to grow up sometime. And you should always be nice to your brother.
Number 37, Monsters vs. Aliens. When this movie came out, I really wanted to get the robot toy that came with the McDonald's kids meals because that was easily the coolest one that they had. I eventually did get it, and I'm reminded of how awesome McDonald's toys used to be back then and how they have been reduced to lame cardboard and knockoff plushies. And now that I have revealed my age and the most memorable part of this movie, let's talk about the actual film. It's an okay movie, not really, but with some very questionable character designs because the people in here are easily more horrifying than any of the monsters or aliens. This movie isn't that good, but it's fine. The action is fun. Sometimes Susan is enough of a sympathetic character. The monster characters have a couple of lines that are funny, but again, they aren't annoying, but aside from a couple of the jokes, I don't really remember that much. That is a bald-faced lie, you motherfucker. You absolutely could remember a lot of the lines from this movie because you've watched it so many times. Fine, you got me. I used to love this film, and it's simultaneously gotten worse and better because the generic elements become more generic, which is a shame, because this had the potential to be a great parody of those old classic movies like The Wolfman or Frankenstein. This could have been the next Shrek, but the bland characters and jokes like this actually hurt, but then there are a lot of really funny moments like this.
Don't rush me, kid. lady. I'm just not ready.
I'm not a danger to anyone or anything.
Don't let her get me.
I don't think we need a monster problem, too.
You got a better idea, nerd.
I want to go home.
Oh, come on, little Debbie. Please don't cry. It makes my knees hurt.
Truth be told, if this movie was better looking, then it would probably rank higher, but it's right along Shark Tales for ugliest DreamWorks movie. But overall, I wouldn't look down on someone who really enjoys this one, because as I mentioned, there are things to like in here. But for me, it just doesn't cut it.
Good luck getting over me.
Bob, it's me he's never gonna get over.
Wait! You were dating Derek too? That two-timing jerk!
Number 36, Ruby Gilman, Teenage Kraken.
Of said prom boat. Look into those eyes. Tell me he hasn't seen it all. I trust him with my life, and so should you. And that is why I, Ruby Gilman, should go to prom. Thank you.
Ah yes, the worst performing DreamWorks movie at the box office, because after every YouTuber and their mother praised DreamWorks with the release of Puss in Boots and The Last Wish, and how DreamWorks is going through a modern renaissance, that of course means they did not go see it in theaters, because most YouTubers do not practice what they preach. Hey, I'm at least honest about that. Cover that up! But the actual movie is just kinda standard, but I do feel like this film took more risks than say Trolls or Boss Baby, and some of those ones at least paid off while others don't. First off, there's nothing in this film that I actively despise or I think is downright terrible. Actually, the only thing I didn't like in this film was the action scenes, because they just felt so underwhelming considering how much they built it up in the trailers. You promised big kaiju battles, give us big kaiju battles! Other than that, there are a couple things I actually enjoyed from this film. For starters, I like Narissa, although based on the internet, there are people that really liked her. But she's a pretty fun, vain villain. I do like that she's actually comes across as a decent person, which really plays into the idea that mermaids are great at deceiving others, and then reveal their true nature with their original origin of luring sailors in only to drown them. It's a fun little detail. You know, props for that. I also like the relationship between Ruby and her mom, with both sides making sense, although it's still frustrating that we have to have the parent that keeps a secret from the kid. And now that I think about that, this is the exact same plot as Little Mermaid 2, which is not a good thing because you do not want to be compared to that movie. Okay, but there actually are some nice dialogue exchanges with the two that actually feel like a real conversation with a mother and daughter.
I know, but right now, I just want to keep you safe, honey, and that means getting you home.
Mom, look at me. I won't even fit inside of our house anymore.
Hey. You'll get small again. It just takes a little time. I'm here. I'll wait with you. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm really glad you're here, Mom.
I also like that both are shown to be in the wrong, and that the situation is more gray than black and white, and not another version of Turning Red where the child is completely in the right and the parent isn't, even though the child is a literal child.
Gyrating! I am 13! Deal with.
This is probably one of the most recent examples I can think of where the parents are shown to be flawed, but they really do have the best intentions for their kid, even if they don't know how to express it all the time. You know, how most parents probably are, despite every show and movie showing them as the big evil oppressors of the stupid 13-year-olds who definitely don't have the capacity to make good long-term decisions. Other than those two elements, the rest of the movie is just fine, which is gonna be the pattern for most of the movies in this section of the ranking. Speaking of mid-movies,
and a Kraken will always answer the call.
Number 35, Kung Fu Panda 4.
Let's do that again.
And next time, keep your surf off their turf.
So I actually had a whole script written for a review of this movie and even made the thumbnail and recorded it. It was midway through the editing process when I decided to scrap it because it was pretty much the same as every other video on this movie that was coming out at the time. I mean, it's easily the weakest of the series, with a lot of the evidence both in the movie and from the leaks behind the scene that this movie was kind of just meant to be a comedy and didn't seem to have a focus on the heart, with any attempts at it being very obvious that they were last minute additions. Kung Fu Panda 4 not only had the worst villain in the series, but easily one of the worst DreamWorks villains. Although not the worst, because at least the shape-shifting ability is cool. Not to mention that Zen is a laughably bad character in addition to one of the most predictable stories I've ever seen. I mean, the 5-year-olds in my theater were calling out important plot points 30 minutes before they even happened. To add to Zen, Awkwafina delivers such a bland and uninspired performance. It's a shame because this film has some real potential, but sadly fell very short. And honestly, the more I think about this film, the worse it gets. It hurts seeing some characters get absolutely butchered, like Kai and Shen, which Kai should not be there because, you know, he got spirit exploded, and Shen would absolutely never bow to Po. So if this film does so much wrong, why isn't it lower? Well, because there are still some good elements to it, like the comedy, for me at least, was successful 50% of the time, and the action scenes are honestly some of the best in the series. So to say there was no effort would be a flat out lie. It's just no effort went into the characters and the story. But like any sequel that comes out way too late after the original film's concluded and turned out to be aggressively mediocre, I'll probably forget about it days after I've seen it, and Kung Fu Panda 4 is no exception. Actually, one last thing that is worth noting about this film is the awesome cover of Hit Me Baby One More Time by Tenacious D, which goes way harder than it has any right to be. And I did in fact listen to it on loop while writing the script for the Kung Fu Panda 4 video that never came to be.
See you on the other side, Dragon Warrior.
Number 34, Over the Hedge.
Very scary rabbit squirrel. Hey, it's working!
Behind you!
I know, you're right behind me!
This is probably the biggest surprise of this ranking for me. For context, I watched this film a lot growing up and was quite fond of it. So I'm shocked that upon rewatching, I disliked this film much more than I remember. I have a feeling I will be crucified for this one, but this film is very mid. Like, there are certainly some funny jokes, but aside from jokes, which credit where credit is due, there are some very funny ones in here, but the characters are just kind of one note. And it has one of my most hated story cliches ever, the liar reveal. And it doesn't do anything new or interesting with it, so I cringed throughout the whole film knowing where it's going to go. Now, I really should speak about how funny this film is, because it's carrying everything else so hard that both of its knees just busted like two swollen mosquitoes.
Yes, Hammy.
I filled the log.
What the?
Look! I found my nuts!
Number 33, Trolls Band Together.
No, please! I barely have any talent left to give. I mean, maybe like a desperate Christmas album or a one-off national anthem performance. But that is it!
I can't believe that I'm going to say this, but I actually kind of had a mostly relatively enjoyable time with a Trolls film. I know, I didn't see that one coming either, but hey, I guess it shows that DreamWorks can still surprise us. By no means is this a great movie. I really wouldn't even call it good. But for some reason this one really clicked with me. Well, at least as much as one of these movies can. I can't think of anything objectively awful or anything that really annoyed me, but at least for me, like I said, I had a decent amount of fun with this one. For starters, this film has a more consistent character development than the Star Wars sequels, which isn't all that shocking, but it's still pretty pathetic considering on how Disney handled their franchises. Poppy, who has always been the most annoying character for me in these movies, seems to be a lot more toned down and isn't obnoxious and actually listens to people. Who knows? You know, the thing they were setting up from the last movie, but they didn't execute. Like, I'm genuinely shocked on how much this film seems to be learning from the past two entries. Another area of improvement in this film is the villains Velvet and Veneer, who are actually memorable because, for starters, I actually remember their names, unlike Rock Troll and Evil Chef Bergen. Wait, Chef is her name? They are your spoiled, bratty villains, but they have fun with them, and they do have some pretty funny lines.
Do you want to lose all this and go back to the dark place where we had nothing?
Please, sir. I want some more.
Girl, we grew up in the suburbs. Our parents were dentists.
So, how was school today?
Stop attacking me!
Plus, their musical numbers are all bops, with the best easily being the cover of Sweet Dreams, which I've listened to on repeat an obnoxious amount of times, and it's still a bop every time.
Who am I to disagree?
I traveled the world and the seven seas. And
Hold your head up.
moving on. Keep your head up. Moving on. Hold your head up. Moving on.
The humor of these movies has always been hit or miss with me, but for whatever reason, the comedy in this movie seemed to really stick with me, at least better than the previous ones. So this sounds like a pretty good movie, right? I wouldn't go that far. It's still kind of mid in some places and there isn't anything exceptional about it. But for what it is, it's an enjoyable kids movie that parents wouldn't want to claw their eyes out if they had to watch it with their kids. But it's a relatively enjoyable, if empty, inoffensive 90 minutes. Number 32, Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas.
Nice place you got here.
Like it? I'm planning on doing the whole world this way.
Wow, that's a good plan.
After DreamWorks had released several banger films, including Ants, Prince of Egypt, Road to El Dorado, Chicken Run, Shrek, and Spirit, Sinbad was the first DreamWorks movie that even audiences thought this film was a dud. And yeah, I kinda see why. This film does one of my biggest pet peeves, which is way too modern sounding dialogue in vernaculars in a time period that does not reflect it. I cringe anytime I hear it in a movie, and this film kinda has a lot of it. It also has a very cliche love story, with you knowing Sinbad and Catherine Zeta-Jones. I could not remember the name of her character, and I did not care enough to look it up. It's just the classic arguing couple that are fighting all the time, but eventually they love each other because arguing equals flirting, apparently. All the side characters are pretty forgettable. I remember their designs and their voices, but I couldn't for the life of me remember the names of any of them or any of the lines they say. All that stuff aside, we have some actually really good elements in this movie. Sinbad as a character isn't actually too bad. Nothing special, but he's charismatic and actually has a nice, believable character arc. Also, if you ask my friend, then he's also very hot too, so that has to appeal to someone out there. Me personally, I find myself being drawn towards Eris. She's such a fun villain that wants to cause chaos, and her design is...
Are you okay?
Me? Yes, I'm fine. I am fine. I'm totally...
But the way she moves clearly shows the mad skills of the animators, which is even more impressive considering they did all of her animation with one hand. The constellations also being her pets is also extremely sick. And Michelle Pfeiffer is clearly having a lot of fun chewing on the scenery and raising chaos, among other things.
Well, well, well. This has got to be a little embarrassing for you, Eris.
Don't push your luck, Sinbad. You're cute, but not that cute. And lucky for you, I've got places to go, things to destroy.
After receiving an absurd amount of horse tranquilizers, I am now calm enough to talk about the rest of this movie. Which is a pretty fun adventure movie, which I feel is lacking nowadays, which is a shame because adventures in animated movies make for a fun watching experience. So even if this is a bit of a generic movie for the time that it came out, I'd take a standard anime movie like this than Boss Baby or another Despicable Me movie. Number 31, Puss in Boots.
And tell me all you care about is the gold. Puss. Kitty. Oh my God!
This is one of those movies that every time I think about it and I remember really enjoying it and thinking that it's a pretty solid film, and then I go back and watch it, and what I get instead is a mid-action movie that is fun in pieces, but as a whole is a bit of a cohesive mess. Starting with positives, the soundtrack is bien. I feel like we don't get many soundtracks like it nowadays, probably because we don't get many Western Spanish outlaw movies, but it scratches that itch that I often have for some heroic outlaw instrumentals. The action is also pretty fun, with the climax being almost the exact same as Shrek 2, but it's still funny, and just like most of these movies, there are a couple of moments that make me chuckle. I feel like this movie struggles with balancing the more fantastical elements and making it more realistic, because we have certain fairy tale characters in here like Jack and Jill and Humpty Dumpty, but I feel like they are trying to do these these more realistic, edgy versions of the characters. Speaking of Humpty, Dumpty is changed from revenge of destroy the city to, yeah, I'll save it. It was way too fast and not believable, and that makes the final scene where he's been a good egg the whole time unbelievable. This film also comes to a jarring halt because we have to have what feels like a 20-minute long flashback sequence about their childhood, which isn't bad, but it totally comes out of nowhere. It almost feels like it should have been its own movie or heavily edited so it wasn't as long as it was, because as is, it interrupts the flow of the Magic Bean story. Honestly, I feel like that's all to really talk about with this one, at least everything that I feel is noteworthy. Move on to the next one.
I am Puss in Boots, and my name would become legend.
Number 30, Mr. Peabody and Sherman.
I know, and much quicker than you as well.
But are you quick enough?
For this!
See? Quick!
Quick, yes, but not too smart.
Oh! Another cantaloupe!
Penny absolutely drags this movie down, and I will never forgive her for it. I get that's the point, that she is this entitled brat, but it's one thing for her to verbally bully Sherman, but she puts him in a freaking chokehold. They are 10 years old, and what's worse is that they try to make him have this romantic relationship with each other. We don't need romantic subplots involving 10-year-olds because that's just kind of weird and uncomfortable, but you especially can't do it when one of them had the other in a chokehold less than 24 hours earlier. In addition to the chokehold, she's just insufferable throughout the whole film. Ms. Grunion also drags the film down. Yes, I get that's why she's in here, to act as a nuclear family worshiper who thinks anyone who isn't in a male and female relationship shouldn't raise kids, and that's not a bad idea in theory, but it feels like a more unnecessary conflict when we already have all of space and time collapsing, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but seems like just a teeny weeny little bit of a bigger problem than discrimination. All that being said, the rest of the movie is so freaking good, you guys. It has this fun wit and quirkiness to it, but not in a forced astrology white girl kind of way. The relationship between Mr. Peabody and Sherman is also the heart and soul of this film and carries it so hard, and is strong enough that it at least surpasses Penny and Grunion. They do feel like a real child and parent relationship, especially a parent that doesn't really know how to parent, but still very much loves their child. This film is solid. I like it, but I hate that I don't love it. I do love this final line that puts a nice little bow on the emotional powerhouse that is the father and son dynamic of this movie.
I love you, Mr. Peabody.
I have a deep regard for you as well, Sherman.
But as is, it has too many elements that weigh it down from truly being a great movie.
Sherman, wait.
Yes, Mr. Peabody?
I love you, Sherman.
I have a deep regard for you as well, Mr. Peabody.
Number 29, Madagascar.
What?
Excuse me?
That's dumb. Come, Maurice. What is a simple bite on the buttocks among friends? Here, give me a nibble.
The first Madagascar is a fun and zany movie. The comedic timing and animation is all very fast-paced, but not to the point where you can't take in a joke. I like that the story is Alex not eating his friends. I can't think of too many times where I've seen this in a movie, so points for creativity. You do feel a sense of friendship between the zoo animals and believe that they have known each other and have been friends for a long time. If I had to be nitpicky, it's that the film can be a bit generic at times, but overall the movie is really trying to just be fun and funny, and it does those things pretty well. So to come at this film extremely aggressively for some minor problems seems very silly. Nothing else to say.
Skipper! Don't you think we should tell them that the boat's out of gas?
Nah, just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Number 28, The Penguins of Madagascar.
You don't have a family, and we're all going to die.
Similar to the first Madagascar, there isn't a whole lot to say about this one other than I had fun and I think it's funny. More of the jokes landed with me for this one. Again, this isn't a super deep movie or a terrible one where I need to elaborate on why I feel the way I do about this one. So, next.
Who says penguins don't fly?
Number 27, Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted.
What's new, pussycat?
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Marty, what phase are we at?
Phase 3! Apologize!
Right. Oh man, we are so sorry.
Well, apology accepted.
If you had asked me several years ago which is my favorite Madagascar film, I would have said this one hands down. However, this movie has soured me a bit, with the biggest frustration being the liar reveal story, which I absolutely loathe. It's almost never done in an interesting way and always ends the same way, with both parties being sad but they eventually come together. Chances are, if a movie has this story beat in it, I'm probably gonna dislike the movie, or at least not gonna love it. Luckily, the rest of the film is strong enough that this trope doesn't drag the whole movie down to the depths of hell. The villain, Captain Dubois, is so much fun as a villain, while also being incredibly intimidating. I can honestly say she's a top 10 DreamWorks villain and steals every scene she's in. The comedy is also pretty solid. I think there are a couple of weak jokes, but for the most part, I think the jokes are up to the standard for the franchise. The emotional beats are also all very solid, with the two best being when the zoo gang makes it back to the zoo and reflect on what they've been through and how it compares to their zoo life. It feels very nice considering how far the series has come and feels very earned. The second being Vitaly the Tiger and overcoming the fear of failure. It's definitely a contender or honorary mention for my favorite DreamWorks moments. This sounds like it's the best in the franchise, right? Well, like I said, if it wasn't for that damn liar reveal plot point, I cannot look past it because it's as painful as it is in every other movie. This should show how much I despise this trope. Some might say, Cameron, that's kind of spiteful and petty, and to that I say, you're fucking A right! Number 26, Madagascar, Escape to Africa.
Plane won't be fixed until the shoots meet our demands. Now, about maternity leave.
Maternity leave? You're a male.
So if I think Madagascar 3 is so good, minus the one exception, why is 2 above it? Well, for starters, I think this one is funnier. The jokes landed more with me, and the snappy animation lends itself to physical comedy better. In my completely expert comedic opinion, the movie also has some emotional moments. They aren't as strong as 3, but they're still good, minus the whole romance thing that's kind of handled clumsily and it's not painful. Just awkward. Alec Baldwin is also a pretty meh as a villain. All he had to do is act like himself, then he would have been way more hateable. This movie's above 3 because 1, it's funnier, and 2, if the lie reveal trope was a person, the amount of war crimes that would occur against it would make even the most bloodthirsty of dictators blush.
Hey! Shake the hot thing! Shake the hot thing! Shake 'em! Shake 'em! Shake 'em! Shake 'em!
Number 25, The Croods.
I want to see some real caveman action out there. We do this fast. We do this loud. We do this as a family. And never not be afraid.
I like this movie. I acknowledge it's not the best, but I really like it. I won't pretend like this movie doesn't have a ton of cliches with a very unpopular pissing match between an overprotective dad and the boyfriend of the daughter. However, kind of like in the first Hotel Transylvania movie, I can't really say it for other movies, but at least you understand why are they protective. In the case of Grug, because it's an extremely dangerous world with them being the only cave people left, and those old ways have kept them safe so far. But even then, we see that Grug realizes that his knowledge of protecting his family isn't effective in this new world, which I'm sure for a father, I cannot speak from any experience personally, so this is a hunch, but not being able to protect your family would probably make anyone tense, especially when someone new comes along and has all these solutions that are radically different, however, are actually protecting his family. And yes, the middle of this film is cliched and doesn't have too much going for it, although I think the comedy across this film works a lot for me at least, but it does drag in some parts. But we get to the climax where Grug has to throw his family across the crevasse. Really emotional and well done. He hasn't been able to do a lot in the new world, but he can do this one last thing to ensure the safety of his family. However, even when he has thrown them across, he hears the shells and thinks they are in danger and uses Guy's ways to get across, where we get a really emotional moment.
Where's the danger? Who blew their shell?
I love you too.
Again, I'm not gonna pretend this is a masterpiece of a film, and I understand why people don't like it, but I don't think it's as mid as people make it out to be. At the very least, should get recognition for what it does right, because this film has some really strong moments. Granted, it's towards the end, but it hits me in the feels. Maybe it's because family is pretty important to me, and I appreciate it when they at least did something with family, and specifically fathers, since I feel like we don't get to see a lot of fathers in media, let alone somewhat competent ones. I said somewhat. So this is one DreamWorks movie that has always had a special place in my heart, even if it is kind of lacking in some areas.
So from now on, we'll stay out here, where we can follow the light.
Number 24, Ants.
Beautiful worker girls.
Weaver, they're career girls. They're obsessed with digging. I really don't think I'm ever gonna meet the right girl for me.
Who said there was a girl for you? I was talking about a girl for me.
Ants, the very first DreamWorks movie, an infamous movie for the drama behind the scenes of this and Bug's Life, none of which I want to get into, because if I wanted to talk about the drama, I would have become a commentary channel. But which is the better film? Ants. I don't really care for A Bug's Life, to be honest, but that's a story for another day. I actually enjoy Ants quite a bit, and one reason for this is the world it builds, with it being much more realistic than A Bug's Life, which made for a much more engaging and entertaining movie, at least for me. I also like how dark it is, with it being much more violent, but in a way that helps the story. I actually did a video for some of these aspects for a school project and was going to release it to the channel, but you got the Caesar video instead, which in my opinion was the better of the two, but I might be a little biased. I also like all the characters. They all feel fleshed out and not just simple character traits personified. Yes, the animation is fairly rough in some spots, and overall it's certainly uglier than A Bug's Life, but that just helps the overall tone, making it grittier and more real. Nothing excellent, but certainly a solid start to a new animation studio, even if the creation of its origins are a bit dubious.
And I'm working with a new therapist, you know, terrific, absolutely terrific. He's been putting me in touch with my inner maggot, which is helping me a great deal. And, you know, I finally feel like I found my place. And you know what? It's right back where I started. But the difference is, this time, I chose it.
Number 23, B-Movie.
Something stinks in here!
I love the smell of flowers.
Yeah? How do you like the smell of flames?
Not as much.
From one insect movie to another, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, dear viewer, and I know that I will get a lot of flack about this, so get those roasts ready, but I kinda like the B-Movie unironically. Yeah, I know. Just allow me to at least explain myself. The cons of this film, the majority of the human character designs are pretty ugly and bad, and there is also so much going on in this movie with about 5 different subplots, with some of them coming and going and not even getting resolved. That being said, how can you not enjoy this film? It's the cinematic version of Nickelback. You may say you don't like it, but you still know all the memes from it. At least this has more personality than a Nickelback song. Wow, so stunning and brave of me to say such a controversial statement. No one has ever badmouthed Nickelback before. Well, I'll have you know that a Nickelback fan wrote that joke, so now you don't know what the hell to think, huh? Nah, I'm just kidding. We don't hire Nickelback fans here. But the B-Movie clearly embraces the pure insanity that it has to offer, and that's something I can get behind. Any movie that can just say screw it and tear off the straitjacket and go off the rails is a friend of mine. It's certainly more entertaining to watch than a completely mid-movie. Aside from the craziness, I think I should give its due credit. The flight scenes are pretty well done. The creativity in the beehives is also very eye-appealing. There are also some pretty funny jokes in here, and I actually like the ending conflict, even if it does seem a bit rushed and overly dramatic. But I like that even though they win the case, there are consequences to their actions. They didn't just say, oh, we won the court case, happy end, roll credits. I think it shows that there was some effort put into the film, because they could have had a lot more romance subplot between Barry Benson and Vanessa. I'm gonna be completely honest, the B-Movie is where it is because I simply couldn't allow it to be any higher because I would not hear the end of it. Don't worry, it wasn't gonna be super high or anything, but I will say this is probably one of the few DreamWorks movies that I could watch anytime and actually quite enjoy it.
Beautiful day to fly.
Sure is.
Between you and me, I was dying to get out of that office.
It's alright.
Number 22, Abominable. Abominable is one of the few DreamWorks movies that I have never seen when making this list, and I was definitely very curious of it, since from the trailers it looked like it was going to have some really incredible scenes, but also some very dumb and goofy scenes. However, upon watching the film, it in fact turns out that's exactly what it is. Abominable is a mixture of heartfelt, beautiful artistic moments and extremely childish comedic scenes with everything else in between. Comments first, Ping was extremely annoying and very much like Thunk from The Cruise, but had way more screen time, which made him more annoying in comparison. The twist villain was also extremely predictable, but I feel like years of watching Scooby-Doo has trained me to figure out who the bad guy is immediately. It wasn't as fast as Evelyn from Incredibles 2, but it was still pretty quick. It's just another I want money from this super rare creature type villain. Basically Clayton if he sucked out any shred of little personality that he had. The comedy is a mixed bag, with some of it being pretty funny, with this line probably being my favorite.
You're the bad guys. Ah! Your gerbil is freaking me out.
A boy that knows his gerbils. I like him.
But also some just clearly targeted to little kids type humor. Aside from those things, there is quite a bit to praise for this movie. For starters, the animation is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, we should expect this from modern animated movies, but still, it's very impressive, especially the nature shots. I'm also a big fan of the music, with all of it complementing the animation and scenes wonderfully. Eve is a very nice character where we get to see her journey of grief and loss and how she's able to navigate it through the help of Everest and the journey they all go on. This is all done through a lot of moments that are allowed to breathe and just take time for them to play out and not feel rushed. It's a nice little movie that has some really beautiful moments that are just comforting. And while a bit slower paced, I believe it's to the movie's benefit.
There is no one in the world who likes these pork buns more than me.
Well, maybe one.
Who else like my buns? No laughing. I'm serious.
Number 21, The Bad Guys.
What the thorax? Are you crazy?
What? I just wanted a longer car chase. It's the best part.
Well, I already have done a separate video for The Bad Guys when it first came out and gave it a fairly high praise, and for the most part I hold pretty similar opinions as then. Mr. Wolf and Mr. Snake are the best characters and have the best development. I like how they are having conflicts amongst their friendship and worried about being left behind.
You want to know why I hate birthdays, Wolf? Do you? When you grow up a snake, nobody shows up to your party. Birthdays are a constant reminder that out there, I'm just a scary, good-for-nothing monster.
Diane is also pretty solid, and everyone else is just kind of fine, although on a second watch, the other bad guys are more annoying than I remember them being. Comedy is mostly solid, but there are definitely heavy moments of cringe, and not the good kind. The action and animation is very fast-paced and stylized, which I always appreciate doing something outside the norm. The messaging and themes have been done better and before in other DreamWorks movies, of which will come later, but overall, it's a fun movie. Plus, any movie that teaches people to actually be accountable for their actions will always get kudos from me. And the whole furry community loved this movie. I shouldn't be surprised that much, but it makes me wonder about them from time to time.
Webbs, hit it.
Number 20, The Croods, A New Age.
What's wrong with the sleep pile?
Oh, come on, Eep! The sleep pile reeks! Reeks of love!
Well, at least I smell like me. I don't even know what you smell like.
Flowers and soft rain.
So I really like the first Croods to the point that when I saw trailers for this one, I was kind of upset because it looked like this was going to be a very childish cash grab. Yes, I had a don't you dare ruin my beloved IP with the f***ing Croods. Well, even though I like the first Croods especially more than the average person, I can still admit that this is the better movie and more enjoyable. It's extremely funny.
Go get it!
Gruggers. Grug.
And that flea-infested rat baby? You dumb baby.
Okay, I'm gonna kill her.
Douglas! Douglas!
Here, right here. All your needs will be met.
I'm hungry.
In a minute!
Take that!
I did not expect to laugh this hard at the Croods 2. Honestly, this is similar to Madagascar 2 versus Madagascar 3, where one has much more powerful emotional moments, but there are just enough cliches that it does cripple the movie enough where the second film is not necessarily as emotional, but it's not necessarily trying to be. It's a funny movie that doesn't take itself too seriously and just wants to tell some jokes. I feel like Eep is more fleshed out as a character, but who cares, it's funny. Plus this film paved the way for one of the best DreamWorks movies, but we'll get to that one later.
We call Bronana bread.
My father was afraid of the pack getting smaller.
But in the end, it got bigger. A whole lot bigger.
Dad was right after all. We were stronger together.
Number 19, Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Ah, Wallace and Gromit. How can you not like them? They're just charming and quaint and almost make me forget about my natural American hatred for Britain.
Let's get
Almost. In school, a go-to video for teachers to play at my school were Wallace and Gromit shorts, but I'd never seen this one either, or maybe I have, but it was so long ago that I don't remember it. It's all a weird fever dream in my memory. But I can happily say that Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, is as delightful and charming as you would come to expect. It's filled with some pretty funny moments. And Lord Victor Quatermain III is both a hilarious and legitimately threatening villain at times. I feel like there's not a whole lot I can say about this movie other than it's a fun little movie that I enjoyed. It's not trying to be this great character study or tell this vast and complex story. Wallace and Gromit, man, and it does it very well. What else is there to say? Number 18, The Road to El Dorado.
You know, family matters, you know, and it's just a bit family. Bada bing, bada boom, you know what I mean.
Oh, we expected you to be staying with us for the next 1,000 years.
Well, as we say in the spirit world, there's your plan and then there's the God's plan.
The Road to El Dorado was one of the earliest DreamWorks films and had a bunch of rewrites and production problems with it, originally being a much more adult movie, but some of that might have leaked through. Miguel and Tulio are some pretty fun characters, and you have a believable friendship with them. Sometimes it's almost too believable. But they have some pretty good comedic timing, and holy shit, Kenneth Branagh voices Miguel? My autistic grown-ass always knew him as the guy that narrated the Walking with Dinosaurs and Walking with Prehistoric Beasts documentary series, and totally forget that he's actually an acclaimed actor and director. But you would too if all you did was hyperfixate on dinosaurs and prehistoric mammals. The story is about two friends who make the city of El Dorado think they are gods and trying to use that to get a bunch of gold in order to escape. The two chiefs are very fun, and it's very entertaining to see them constantly trying to one-up each other, with us getting a classic over-the-top Disney villain from Zekel Khan, and a wise leader giving some wisdom in the form of the chief. The music is also very good, with myself enjoying a lot of the music from this movie, with Elton John doing a great job, and I might be slightly biased since I'm a big fan of this guy, even going to a Halloween party as him and doing some nice little karaoke of I'm Still Standing. I and one other person who has had some involvement with the channel do have footage of that, but no force on heaven or earth will ever make that go public. In particular, Tough to Be a God and Friends Never Say Goodbye have been very popular choices on my playlist. The animation is also very beautiful, with the city of El Dorado truly living up to the visual hype that you would expect from the City of Gold. The jokes are all pretty funny with some great moments. That said, the comedy is a bit mixed with something I've heard specifically from the nostalgia critic, but to paraphrase what he said, the facial expressions and physical exaggeration seem very tame at times when it could be more cartoony. And I can definitely see that. They always seem like they are moving how a real person would move, but why would you make an animated movie if you're not going to have animated characters and act zany? They do act animated, but there's just enough times where it could be a little more exaggerated to make it even funnier, but it's still a very funny movie. But The Road to El Dorado is a very fun movie that has a lot of heart. That's pretty much everything to say.
Hey Cameron, are you in there? Cameron?
Alright, let's get back into this thing. What were you expecting? For me to throw the script over my shoulder? Because that would be kind of a stupid move considering that I built up a lot of hype for this video and people were anticipating it, I assume. Unlike a certain director, I would never do anything so brain-rotting for a cheap comedic moment. Because I love you all. Number 17, Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. Melvin is a stuck-up loser that no one liked in school, and if you relate to him because you were that kid in school, then we cannot be friends. Can you tell I had to deal with people like this before and how I feel about them? Personal feelings towards childhood memories aside, because I never grew up reading the Captain Underpants books. I can't remember if my mom thought they were stupid and didn't want me reading them, or if it was because I thought they didn't have enough animals and dinosaurs on the cover, so I didn't care. The first comic I ever read was Mouse, which is a, It's a comic book, alright. It's actually really good if you can handle it. So I have no prior attachment to the books, but from what I've seen and from what people who have, it's a pretty faithful adaptation, which is a really excellent for fans. Because on top of that, it's also a really good movie that is way more emotional than it has any right to be. George and Harold's relationship may seem exaggerated, except I think for a lot of kids at this age, myself included, even if you had friends live next to you or in your neighborhood, but you get placed into separate classes, it really does hinder a friendship. Even though it's exaggerated, it's something that a lot of people can still relate with. Their friendship is the emotional core of this movie, and their friendship is so believable and heartwarming, not to mention funny. This is one of the few times where juvenile humor actually works, because that's what George and Harold bond over, making it part of that said emotional core, not to mention it's still funny. Okay, it's not the smartest example of the jokes, but they are two boys in elementary school. Of course they find it hilarious. I like that we do get to see them even grow as characters, with the realization of Mr. Krupp always seeing him as this evil principal out to get them, when in fact he's just a sad, lonely, and grumpy grown man. And even doing something nice to help him at the end of the film. The animation is also this beautiful and expressive comic style animation that matches the vibes of the comic books. Plus, come on, it's got a song by Weird Al Yankovic. It's a heartfelt movie that reminds us of the much simpler days when we could just have fun and make jokes with our friends.
I really thought breaking that ring would get rid of his powers!
Yeah, well, here we go again! Tra-la-la!
Number 16, Chicken Run.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a wonderful audience.
Okay, I'm gonna address the elephant in the room. Yes, this film does do the lie reveal trope, and while I still don't love it because it still does the big sad moping part, it does make sure that it doesn't just have the characters wait to get back together to fix everything. Instead, the hens look for a new solution instead of waiting and being sad. And that alternative idea is what actually gets them out of the chicken coop. The frustration of the trope is that characters act like nothing can be done in terms of progressing the story, unlike this where yes, they are hurt, but they try to and successfully find alternative solutions instead of feeling sorry for themselves. So now that I'm done with my TED Talk, the actual movie has so much going for it. For starters, like most Aardman movies, it's incredibly funny, with each character getting some solid lines, but I think Fetcher and Nick have the best ones, although the wildly immature part of me does find Rocky's remarks way funnier than I should.
That's what I'm doing.
Isn't there usually some flapping involved?
Hey, do I tell you how to lay eggs? Relax. We're making progress.
Drunken, anti-Semitic, and racist ranting incidents aside, Mel Gibson has some serious comedic delivery. Despite being very funny, this is a very well done movie about hope and overcoming insurmountable circumstances, and handles topics like depression and suicide very tastefully, with the axe scene being very haunting in particular and a great way to show us how many of the chickens have given up on hope. I didn't mention it earlier, but Aardman does an incredible job at character designs because all of their characters are so iconic, especially with their signature style. Just thought it should be acknowledged. Chicken Run is among one of their best films, however, I think there is one that is slightly better.
Yeah, but you have to have an egg to have a chicken. Yeah, but you gotta get the chicken first to get the egg, and then get the egg to get the chicken out. Hang on, let's go over this again.
Number 15, Flushed Away.
Wait for it, wait for it.
Come and have a go if you think you're fast enough.
Yeah, I actually really like this one, and the only reason why the other movies later are higher than this one is because they all have strong emotional moments that really resonate with me personally. So for a movie about rats in a sewer, ranking this high is a pretty impressive achievement. It's hard to say without getting repetitive of, it's a fun movie, but it is a very good adventure movie with a really creative world and somehow made the sewers, of all places, an interesting environment and made it seem so vast and diverse. A god sewer of all things. Rodney and Rita also have a really good dynamic. While there is a bit of that romantic undertones, I think it's more of a familial/partner dynamic, which is what Rodney ultimately needs and gets at the end of the movie. The Toad, Le Frog, Spike, and Whitey are all incredibly funny villains.
Keep your legs straight when you hit the water.
I kept my legs straight, Spike.
Oh. Ow.
I could honestly say this for the majority of these movies, but the voice acting in this one is top notch and makes some already hilarious lines even funnier. This also has the second best soundtrack of all the DreamWorks movies, with my particular favorites being Dancing by Myself, Are You Gonna Be My Girl, Bohemian Like You, and Proud Mary.
Where are we going?
I have no idea, but we're gonna get there really fast.
I'm coming, Mr. Jones. I'm coming.
Now we're moving on to the heavy hitters of DreamWorks. These are the movies which I could honestly see any of them being top dog, but let's be honest, I rank them for a reason. But I can't see why any of these could be someone's favorite DreamWorks movie. And so, let's dive right in. Number 14, Shrek.
True love and true love's first kiss. Like that's ever gonna happen. What a load
Shrek is probably the most iconic DreamWorks movie and definitely one of the most famous anime movies of all time. It came in and reimagined what animated movies were thought they could be at the time. The comedy, iconic. You know all the lines. Music, iconic. You know all the songs. The characters, iconic. They are incredibly relatable with Shrek's journey about finding people who love him despite everyone telling him that he's a monster. Just chef's kiss.
Hey, what's your problem, Shrek? What you got against the whole world anyway, huh?
Look, I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me. People take one look at me and go, ah, help, run! A big, stupid, ugly ogre. They judge me before they even know me. That's why I'm better off alone.
You know what? When we met, I didn't think you was just a big, stupid, ugly ogre.
Yeah, I know.
His struggles with self-esteem are something that everyone can relate to at some point in their life, or even currently. The relationship between Shrek and Donkey is at their best here, at least in terms of friendship, and helps hammer the themes and messagings of the movie. Shrek has been talked about so much, it's hard to say too much because so much has already been said. You know why Shrek is beloved and why it's such a legendary animated movie. I think there are DreamWorks movies better than it, but that certainly doesn't take away from the cultural impact Shrek has had, because it's definitely deserving of it, and it paved the way for even bigger and better things, as hard as it is to imagine. Shrek is without a doubt an all-star.
I can't breathe.
Number 13, Shrek Forever After.
That's not the only thing you've outgrown.
Hey! I may have let myself go a little since retirement. Hanging up my soul was the best decision of my life. I have all the cream I can drink and all the mice I can chase. I'll get him later.
I was so happy when Shafrila's production did a video on this movie because this has always been my second favorite of the Shrek movies. Even as a dumb 9-year-old, I knew that Shrek Forever After was an underrated gem, so I'm glad the funny coconut crab man recognized it and brought it to the forefront. This movie is not the funniest Shrek movie, not because it's not funny, it just mostly focuses on the drama and the characters, which is something that I can appreciate if done right. Yeah, they do it right. Seeing Shrek come to realize what he had in this twisted version of It's a Beautiful Life is really emotional, with the highlight being Shrek finding his daughter's doll.
You know what the best part of today was? I got the chance to fall in love with you all over again.
You crying?
No! I'm not crying! Be more polite!
Rumpelstiltskin is also such a fun and slimy villain, and honestly, I like him more than Lord Farquaad, who was never all that for me. So why this one over the first Shrek, you may ask? Well, I think the biggest is I really like Shrek's character journey in this one, and I think I only like it as much because the first two are as great as they are. They helped Shrek Forever After get to where it is. That's not to say it can't stand on its own merits, because that would be disrespectful to everyone working on it, but it's the culmination of the journey of Shrek. It's basically Endgame, if it was done well. Shrek Forever After is a very good movie and really does deserve more love and attention. Obviously, it's not the best Shrek movie, but I think we all knew it never would, but that doesn't mean that it's any less deserving of more attention in this high of a ranking.
You know, I always thought that I rescued you from the Dragon's Keep.
You did.
No, it was you that rescued me.
Number 12, Kung Fu Panda 3. Ah yes, what was previously known as the weakest entry in the Kung Fu Panda trilogy until 4 came along and proudly took that title. 4 did make me look back on this movie and think,
perhaps I treated you too harshly.
You know, with the benefit of hindsight.
Not that I ever thought Kung Fu Panda 3 was ever bad. In fact, I've always thought it was a very good film, just not quite great. Granted, that's pretty hard when you're going against these two. However, this rewatch does make me realize that I may have overlooked some excellent elements. But before that, probably my controversial take on this film that I'm sure won't piss anyone off. Kai is overhyped. Wait, hear me out! Kai is incredibly badass and has such a sick and cool design. His jade swords give off serious Kratos energy in the best way, and this theme is perfect. Not to mention J.K. Simmons is as good as we come to expect from him in this role. He is still a solid villain because he is very intimidating. In the depth department, he's a bit lacking. At his core, he is mostly just another I want more power type of villain. I've seen a lot of people try to hype him up as this tragic character that was portrayed by Oogway when he decided to start taking chi from others, and yes, there are lines to hint to that, but they are so brief, and I might add that we are never given a reason on why he started stealing chi. I'd say the fact that he is a conqueror is part of that, but to try and say that his main motivation is other than to get more power seems a bit of a stretch. So much of his dialogue has to do with stealing chi. He does have lines saying he wants revenge on Oogway, but maybe this is just a me thing, but I never felt like that was what was driving him as a character. It's an element of him for sure, but at the end of the day, his goal is just to take over China, destroying Oogway's legacy. It's just something necessary in order to achieve that. Now, let me say Kai is not the worst villain. I would call him very solid, which for me is in between good and okay. It's just I see people saying as an individual character he's right at that same level as Shen and Tai Lung, who are so well written and excellent characters. Kai isn't that, but I understand why people love him and I still really enjoy him. I also feel like in this one the comedy wasn't bad, but I never had any moments where I was getting some hard belly laughs, unlike I get with the first two. That's pretty much any negatives I have. Even then, these are more so comparative negatives, but there is so much good stuff in this movie. Kung Fu Panda 3 has all the staples we have come to expect from the Kung Fu Panda movies. Beautiful animation, with this one being the most beautiful one, with the creativity and action scenes being spectacular. Po is as lovable and goofy as always, and the journey he goes through feels like a natural progression of his journey, at least in terms of themes. I don't necessarily agree with him trying to teach the Furious 5, but him teaching others definitely works. But the way that teaching for Po isn't about teaching, but trying to become more than just what he already is, and how he does this by pushing himself into new experiences, which just like in real life will probably result in a lot of failure, but it's how we let that failure from trying new things discourage us, or if we decide to push through it. Another aspect of the theme that I like is that even when Po is trying this new thing, he realizes he needs to do it his way, which I think is something that gets way overlooked in modern society with most things. School! Which limit individuals by forcing them to only do things one way when they can do things their way. Obviously, some things have to be taught a certain way, but for the most part, I feel like schools in particular could change to better fit individualized needs. But that's my soapbox speech about the American public school system. The introduction of Po's father was something hinted at in Kung Fu Panda 2 and handled very well. Even though he does lie to Po, you understand why he would, considering he thought his son was dead and his wife was killed when Shen attacked their village. The emotional highlights both involve Li Shang, with one being with Po talking about his wife.
She was the total package. Smart, beautiful, tremendous appetite. She was the love of my life. And then, just when I thought I couldn't get any luckier, along you came, my little lotus. I really had it all. Until that one moment.
Dad, you don't have to worry about losing me ever again. Okay?
In his conversation with Mr. Ping on fatherhood, who at this point had been suspicious of Li, fearing Po would be taken away from him, he realizes that he is having a selfish fear, and that Li being back in Po's life is a great thing for Po.
I didn't really come along because I was worried Po would go hungry. I was worried about you.
Worried that I go hungry?
No. I was worried you'd steal Po from me. But I realize having you in Po's life doesn't mean less for me. It means more for Po. Look, he's hurt. He's confused. and he still has to save the world. He needs both his dads.
Kung Fu Panda 3, while maybe the second weakest of the quadrilogy, was still a great conclusion to the series. Until number 4 came out, but hey, I already talked about that one. Number 11, Rise of the Guardians.
Hey, Bunny, check out this view. Oh, you do care.
Rack off, you bloody show pony.
It's impressive how the bad guys can be a thing, and this is the DreamWorks movie that has the most attention on Tumblr. I guess it checks out. You got the lonely, edgy goofball hottie that quite literally isn't seen by others and just wants to be seen and comforted. Of course, this was going to breed an explosion of fan fictions and other types of material, many of which are extremely graphic, I might add. Jokes aside, I was extremely shocked by this movie and how much better it was than I remembered. I definitely knew it was going to be in that positive half of the ranking, but I didn't think it'd be this close to the top 10. So what does this movie do to get it this high? Well, for starters, it has the best Santa ever. Yeah, I said it. Better than Tim Allen, better than Ed Asner, better than Stan Francine, and better than Richard Attenborough. At me at that. Whoever came up with the idea of making Santa Claus a Russian kick warrior deserves a raise. But they don't make it so much that it's not even Santa, because he still acts how you would expect a Santa to act. Jolly, creative, caring, and best of all, full of wonder. This movie has about the maximum amount of whimsy in a movie that I can handle before it gets all sappy and cheesy, but it works because that's kind of the point of the movie. The other core message being what's at your center. Every person cannot be defined to just one core trait. We are layered, but no matter what else we may have, we have our center, which is what defines us. The role of the Guardians is to protect and inspire hope into the children of the world. It's such an uplifting and positive message that I think we need more than ever in a world full of pessimism. Granted, I am part of this and certainly trying to be better about this. Hey, I did 3 positive videos in a row. I'm surprised I don't have rainbows and cotton candy shooting out of my... The tooth collecting scene is extremely funny and I still die watching it every single time.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Take it easy there, champ. He's one of us. Part of the European division. Ça va?
Ho ho ho. Pitch Black is also a fun villain. He has a similar backstory as Jack Frost, but he uses it as an excuse to spread terror and darkness because that's the only way he could be noticed. Not to mention he has a sick design with some super creative powers. I will say there are 2 things I don't like. The first being the elves are clearly just minion ripoffs, but luckily they don't have nearly as much screen time as the trailers made it look. The second on being the very last minute ex machina complete revival of a character from literal nowhere in terms of story. And no explanation is offered. Not even a half one. Like, oh, the children started believing, so he was able to come back. This section is a bit shorter because I honestly would like to give Rise of the Guardians its own video someday so I could do a more detailed analysis because it absolutely deserves it.
My name is Jack Frost, and I'm a guardian. How do I know that? Because the moon told me so. So when the moon tells you something, believe it.
We have now made it to the top 10 movies. These are the creme de la creme DreamWorks films. So let me cease this yapping so I can do some yapping about said top 10. Number 10, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. So Spirit is the only movie on this list at the moment to get a full in-depth analysis video on it, so I'll be brief on repeating some of the points because that video pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about. But in short, Spirit is an incredible visual story that uses almost no dialogue, at least none from the animals, which for an animated movie directed at kids is a ballsy move considering kids usually aren't into that. But it does it so wonderfully in one of those DreamWorks films that has gotten more attention because of how special it was, at least coming from an American studio. studio. Because you know us Americans like things big and loud and stupid. I will say I was saving it for this movie, but I did want to compare two similar scenes from this movie and Spirit Untamed, my least favorite DreamWorks movie, because if there's one way for a studio to guarantee that I hate a movie, it's to make a better version of something I love. Why would we show a scene that, smoothly and naturally shows the amount of time it took Spirit in the original movie to trust people, which he can do it in like 3 days? Clearly Little Creek had no idea what he was doing. A 10-year-old girl is clearly the expert when it comes to gaining the trust of a wild animal. It might have been longer, but the film did such a terrible job of communicating it to the audience that it comes across as 3 days. So as far as I'm concerned, it was 3 days. Yeah, in this movie it's clearly shown that Spirit takes months before he trusts Little Creek. Even then, when he knows Little Creek is a good person and even protects him during the village raid, he still doesn't let him get on his back until the final chase scene, which makes it so much more impactful because their friendship feels real and this moment is earned. The goodbye is also so much more emotional because of it. When you take the time to properly set up emotional payoffs and don't rush them, it makes them so much better. Rushing something, especially when you are basically just copying something already done, just makes the rush product even lazier. When little girl whose name I don't remember and don't care enough to look up a friend's spirit, it's at most in the span of a week, if I'm being generous. And then it's the most basic childish interpretation of gaining a wild animal's trust, especially one that is still having negative experiences with other people. How is it that a movie that came out in 2002 is so much better than this supposedly newer version? In theory, the newer version had all this time to think of ways to improve or look at what made the original so good. So you think it would be just as good, if not better. God, thinking of this movie makes me realize how terrible Untamed is, and I feel more justified in putting it in last place and this one in the top 10. But I do recommend checking out my separate video on this movie, as I talked about how special that movie is to me because I have such a love for this movie, and that isn't going away anytime soon. Number 9, How to Train Your Dragon 2.
Come on, Toothless. Show them what you got, bud.
How to Train Your Dragon 2 is a great movie despite me thinking it's the weakest in the trilogy, which is pretty impressive. That being said, I think there are some issues holding it back, with the biggest one being Drago. In theory, I think there is a good idea with him being a straight up bad dude, and there are in fact bad people who aren't interested in being redeemed. But that's in theory. In practice, he is a take over the world type of villain that screams at the dragons. He's a fine enough threat, but that's about it. Toothless also feels very underutilized as well. In the first and third movie, he is definitely his own character. Here, I feel like he's more of a typical movie dog. Does cute things for sure, but feels like they don't really have anything meaningful for him to do until Drago gets a hold of him. Grievances have been said, now compliments will be handed out like a TikTok star giving PS5s to a group of starving children. That doesn't even make any sense, just skip to animation. Incredible. The flying scenes are all as great as the first film, and the action is wonderfully choreographed and executed. The character designs are also all appropriately aged, and thankfully only enhance the character designs. The dragon designs are also all very creatively, each design perfectly fitting the roles each dragon fills. The soundtrack, still great. John Powell continues to do an excellent job as always. The progression of Hiccup's character is also very well done. We get to see him beginning to grow into this role of a leader, as well as see him fail when he tries to have peace and how that backfires. Talking about Hiccup's failures to find peace, let's talk about Stoic and his death and how some have criticized it with it not being earned or as impactful as it could have been. And while I can see where some come from on this, I don't necessarily agree. For those of you who don't know, there are two tie-in canon series, with one being Riders of Berk and the others being Race to the Edge, both of which take place during the first film and this one. And these two series are great. The animation is of a TV budget, but the show continued to do a great job of fleshing out the characters. Heck, all the side friends that are really annoying in the movies are actually likable in this series. But a notable part of each series is Hiccup's relationship with his father. Both shows show us the growing development of their relationship with one another, and how even though they make progress, there is still that barrier between them that each struggles to overcome but still makes an effort to. If you have watched the shows, then Stoic's change in behavior makes perfect sense and makes his death that much more heart-wrenching. Whereas if you haven't watched it, it is a seemingly sudden change and can feel a bit jarring, and the relationship in 2 doesn't seem as strong to make Stoic's death and funeral as impactful as it should be. And I don't think you should have to watch 8 seasons of television to understand a movie. But I did, and this is my ranking, hence why it's placed so high. Or why it's not an issue for me, but something that enhances the movie. How to Train Train Your Dragon 2 is a great sequel that does something any good sequel should do. It grew and evolved the story in new and interesting ways while still keeping the elements from its first predecessor that made it so successful in the first place.
Oh, sure, they have armies, and they have armadas, but we have our dragons!
Number 8, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. This is one of the few movies that can almost make me cry for a lot of different reasons, both in the movie and just in my own personal life. With one being the recent passing of my little doggo Lola, who my family and I often dubbed our little Night Fury. So obviously Hiccup saying goodbye to Toothless hits even harder, and I didn't make it any easier for myself when I decided to make the brilliant decision to use a track and quote from this movie for her little tribute. May you have all the fields to run around in, Lola. But that's why I love this movie so much. Even though it is about saying goodbye to loved ones and how it hurts, it's the fact that we got to have them in our lives in the first place that allowed us to form these relationships that will eventually end in some way or another, but in the end it's all worth it. That ending is so bittersweet but perfect, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Hiccup continues to grow into his role as a leader, and his struggle and eventual realization that he has to say goodbye to Toothless in order to protect him helps add to the themes of love and loss. Toothless is at his best with definitely the most character work for him happening, with him having a struggle with the choice of his best friend or his love and ruling over all the other dragons in the hidden world where he should be. The main villain Grimmel is also a pretty good villain, being a sort of darker what-if version of Hiccup and being cold and calculating, always one step ahead. A definitive improvement over Drago. However, if you have watched the series, then you'll know him as a Diet Vigo, who is the best villain this franchise has produced. Although Dagger is a pretty fun villain. Some criticisms I do have is that the side gang is at their most annoying here and have way too much screen time. I also feel like the Light Fury could have also had a bit more personality. The comedy is also definitely the most mixed of the trilogy. All that aside, because even though those are negatives, I think the positives far outweigh any negatives, because this is about as perfect a conclusion as you could ask for such a beloved trilogy.
But we Burkians, we know otherwise. And we'll guard the secret until the time comes when dragons can return in peace.
Number 7, Kung Fu Panda.
You are free to eat.
Am I? Are you?
When I first heard that this movie was coming out as a kid, I was fairly excited because I was a dumb little 7-year-old. It looked like a silly movie with goofy jokes. To be fair, I'm sure a lot of people around my age thought similar things, but looking back now and watching the trailers, it's such a shock that not only did this goofy animated movie about a big fat panda doing kung fu completely subvert everyone's expectations and turning out to be a great movie, but easily one of DreamWorks' best and one of the best animated films, period. Po is one of the most likable and relatable protagonists in animated history. He is constantly told about his limitations and flaws, enforcing this idea that he will only ever be this version of himself that he doesn't like. Even when he is chosen to be the Dragon Warrior, something that is this dream come true to him, he's still bullied by Shifu and the Furious Five.
You knew I was trying to get rid of you, yet you stayed.
Yeah, I stayed. I stayed because every time you threw a brick at my head or said I smelled, it hurt. But it could never hurt more than it did every day of my life just being me.
That is such a frighteningly real line that it's actually terrifying. And this is coming from an animated comedy about a panda. Even when Po comes to the realization that the Dragon Scroll is blank and what his dad tells him goes against what he previously thought about himself.
The secret ingredient is
Nothing. Huh?
You heard me. Nothing.
You don't add some kind of special sauce or something?
Don't have to. To make something special, you just have to believe it's special.
There is no secret ingredient.
He was always trying to change who he was when he realized that he is the special ingredient. Contrast it against Tai Lung, who is such an imposing threat that steals every scene he is in. Seeing how dedicated he was to becoming the Dragon Warrior because that destiny of his was forced upon him by Shifu, and then when it turned out he was not meant to be the Dragon Warrior and not supported by Shifu, it shows how he couldn't do what Po could, except what he is. In this case, he was not meant to be the Dragon Warrior. He is still sympathetic to a degree, but I think some people get a little too lenient or try to downplay his actions because of Shifu's treatment and abandonment of him.
You knew I was the Dragon Warrior. You always knew. But when Oogway said otherwise, what did you do? Nothing. You were not meant to be the Dragon Warrior. That was not my fault. Not your fault? Who filled my head with dreams? Huh. Who drove me to train until my bones cracked? Who denied me my destiny?
If he just wanted Shifu, I'd say yes, but he's willing to hurt innocents and go on destructive rampages, not to mention the murder. Lots and lots of murder. I think it's safe that Oogway is one of the most popular comfort characters of the more recent generations, with some of the most iconic lines of the franchise coming from him.
You are too concerned with what was and what will be. There's a saying. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
Not to mention having one of the saddest deaths accompanied by one of the most beautiful movie scores I've ever heard. I know I'm stating the obvious, but this soundtrack is truly something special, with Hans Zimmer and John Puel hitting the ball out of the atmosphere. The fight choreography is very well done, resulting in both thrilling, dramatic, or comedic fight scenes, or in some cases all three. This is a masterpiece and has gained so much attention and praise that all you need to say about this movie is that it's Kung Fu Panda, and everyone automatically knows what you're talking about. If that doesn't speak to a film's quality, then I don't know what does. What else can I say other than it's Kung Fu Panda?
You want to get something to eat?
Yeah.
Number 6, Megamind. Megamind is an absolute masterpiece, and I fully agree with every video essay about how the subversion of characters is masterfully done, how Titan represents incels has aged like a bottle of fine wine, how Megamind's journey is great, how Metro Man's monologue is great, how Roxanne's journey is great. Basically, I fully agree that Megamind deserves all the love and that all the elements are pretty much darn near perfect. I will say that as I gotten older, one thing that has changed about this movie is my perception of Metro Man's choice. As a child, I always saw his choice to not help, at least when Titan is on a rampage, as incredibly selfish, because if you are in a position where you can help someone, you should. I do hold that belief to a certain extent, but that's not the point with Metro Man and his decision. He never had the choice to be anything other than selfless. When he realizes this, he even tries to push Megamind to the same conclusion, that he doesn't have to be what society has labeled him as, that he doesn't have to be the bad guy. He can choose who he wants to be, just like how Titan chose to become a villain. On top of that, this movie is really funny.
Yeah, I'm like your space dad.
And you are what?
I'm your space stepmom. I've had some work done recently.
Here, old friend. In case you haven't noticed, you've fallen right into my trap.
You can't trap justice. It's an idea, a belief.
Even the most heartfelt belief can be corroded over time.
Justice is a non-corrosive metal.
But metals can be melted by the heat of revenge.
It's revenge, and it's best served cold.
But it can be easily reheated in the microwave of evil.
Well, I think your warranty is about to expire.
Maybe I got an extended warranty.
Warranties are invalid if you don't use the product for its intended purpose.
Oh, girls, you're both pretty. Can I go home now?
Now it's time for some witty back and forth banter. You go first. Okay, look, I'm not sure where to go with that.
Megamind! This was for Space Stepmom! You lied to her!
There are certainly a couple of contenders for funniest movie on this list, and Megamind is certainly in the running for it. The action is also very creative, with a lot of emphasis on spectacle that pays off, resulting in the best superhero entrance ever. And I mean in any superhero movie ever. You name me a better superhero entrance and I'll show you a funny Amy Schumer special. Megamind really is the real deal. And you want to know the difference between this movie and The Bad Guys, which is another movie that is about people forced into their villainous roles by society only to learn that they can be be the good guys.
Yeah? What's the difference?
Presentation!
Number 5, The Prince of Egypt. Okay, before I get crucified for putting this at number 5, I'll go on the record that I could probably concede that this is probably the best DreamWorks film objectively, or at least one of the 3 in terms of pure artistry. I also did put it in the top 5 out of 46, which puts it in the top 10%. Prince of Egypt is a masterpiece of a film. The animation, cinematography, voice acting, music, the atmosphere, the characters, the story, all of it amazing. Although a significant chunk of that last one comes from the previous sources. Ramesses is without a doubt the best DreamWorks villain, and that's saying something because there is some stiff competition. Part of what makes him such a great villain is his relationship with Moses.
So, you have returned, only to free them.
They are brothers, which makes it even more heartbreaking when they have to fight against each other for Moses to free his people, because you know they both care about each other. But Ramesses has been essentially shamed and pressured into ruling Egypt as his father did, not wanting to be the weak link in the line of pharaohs. Moses is also an incredible protagonist that goes through, well, they do call it a Moses journey for a reason when referring to other characters' journeys in a movie. I think that really speaks volumes. The soundtrack is also magnificent, with each song being both what the story needs while still excellently crafted objectively. So how I've talked about this movie, many angry people are wondering why number 5. Well, for one, I did say this was my list, so my personal feelings and thoughts towards every animated DreamWorks movie is considered, which leads me to the next point. As great as The Prince of Egypt is, I can only relate to it so much. I can love the relationship between Ramses and Moses, but I can only relate to it so much as an individual watching a situation. Most of the time in modern times, people on the internet especially really try to hyper-focus on objective statements when looking at movies, and yes, objective criticism is absolutely needed and necessary. It often overlooks something very obvious about movies, and I'm absolutely guilty of doing this too, so this isn't a way to try to call specific people out, but movies are art, and art is meant to speak to us on a personal level. And each of our personal experiences, interests, dreams, successes, and failures shape how we take in art, and in my case, the top 4 movies remaining do that for me over Prince of Egypt. Who I am as a person defines who I am. I don't believe in hiding who you are or what you like. These are movies that I connect with on that level. And just like how you have that one movie that you can connect with because that's who you are, and that should never be shamed or discouraged. So with that, let's get down to the last 4 movies of this list. Number 4, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
I'm done running. Fear me if you dare.
Funny enough, the last DreamWorks video I did, I took a small portion of it to talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and how amazing it is, and well, you can tell that it still ranks very high with me. This movie has been talked about at length on the internet and how amazing of a film it is, and obviously I agree. Duh. Anyone with normal working eyes could tell that the animation is incredibly beautiful and stylized with obvious influences like Spider-Verse, but still having its own unique spin on it. But I assume you all want to hear me say what I liked about the most popular part of this movie, or should I say character. And fine, I'll stop beating around the bush. But Mama Luna truly is one of the great— Nah, I'm just kidding, it's Death.
And I don't mean it metaphorically, or rhetorically, or poetically, or theoretically, or in any other fancy way. I'm Death. Straight up.
You know Death is terrifying when a grown man-child has the occasional nightmare of him, or wakes up when you're half asleep and the jacket on the wall looks exactly like Death and you just accept your time has come. Okay, minus the accepting death part because I'm going down swinging, even though that climax would be shorter than, well. But yes, I have nightmares where Death from this movie is coming after me. It's not often, but the fact that it's happened at all I think is the best way I could describe how effective he is and why Puss's anxiety attacks are so real. And his fear of death coming for him is something very real and that everyone has experienced parents at least at some point in their life. I also love the story of realizing what matters in life, but also fighting for this life since it's the only one we get. Not too much I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said by people much smarter than me. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, I congratulate you on making it this far in the ranking. A truly impressive feat for such a relatively new movie.
Where are we headed anyways?
Off to find new adventures and to see some old friends.
Now, coming in third place for our bronze medal, we have Shrek 2.
Harold! Shrek!
Fiona!
Mom! Harold!
Donkey!
Wow, I'm so surprised. Who ever saw this coming? Shrek 2 is another internet darling, and also rightfully so.
Hey, who's this guy? Who let this guy in?
I just,
He's got a real funny face. I like your face, guy.
Thank you.
What a cute, funny face. You want a cookie? Can someone
okay.
get this guy a cookie?
Since I was a wee little lad, I watched this movie all the time, and I'm glad to say that it still holds up. Shrek 2 takes every element from the first Shrek and somehow improves upon it. I have said there are a lot of funny DreamWorks movies, but this one takes the cake. I quote this movie daily, and I have laughed some of the biggest, hardest gut laughs every time I've watched this movie.
Back the gossamer curtains to find her.
What?
Princess Fiona?
No!
Oh, thank heavens.
Police brutality! Police brutality!
Hey, look, a little cat.
Look out, Shrek! He got a piece!
What do you reckon we should do with him?
I say we take the sword and neuter him right here. Give him the Bob Barker treatment. Oh, madre, no, por favor. Please, I implore you. You capitalist, big time. Oh, get it off. Oh, yeah.
Catnip.
That's no mind.
Oh, you great stupid pastry. Come on. I'm wearing ladies' underwear.
Are you?
I most certainly am not.
It looks like you most certainly am on.
I am not.
What kind?
It's a thong.
I can maybe count on one hand the number of jokes that didn't land with me, because every other joke is on the verge of suffocating me with a comedic plastic bag over my face. Oh yeah, and then there's that one scene that's it's pretty iconic, I guess.
Hit it!
I'm not sure if I can find it, but I know my folks took some home videos of little 4-year-old Cameron dancing to the song, and hey, it's still my most listened to song of all time, 2 years in a row, because I'm basically as close as I can get to straight up injecting this song into my veins. But if you ever need a good workout song, you know what you need to do, but if you have the strength for something so awesome will depend on your resolve. I won't go into detailed number of times I think of this scene alone. It's a concerning amount, like go get tested to see if I have autism amount. Also, fairy godmother, MILF. And I will die on that hill, no matter what other people may argue. Not many people would deny Shrek 2 is an iconic movie, but some may argue Puss in Boots 2 is more deserving of this spot and flip Shrek 2 with this one. And to that I say, it was at one point. The flip-flopping between these two was excessive, but at the end of it, it came down to one thing, the main ideas of each movie. One is about cherishing this life we have because it is precious and we only have one of them. The other one is about finding out that you are in fact worthy of receiving love from others, even if you yourself don't necessarily feel that all the time about yourself. Without going into too much detail, because I'm not trying to paint a sob story for pity, but Shrek 2 was given spot 3 because of that and how it portrays Shrek's very insecurities, and fairy godmother, who is an excellent villain, preys on these to further her own agenda. It's very possible as I get older, Puss in Boots 2 might switch spots, and not to get grim, but it's not like I'm getting any younger here. But valuing this life has always been a pretty important value for me and something that I've never personally struggled with. So seeing that portrayed in the movie is great. But there's just something about seeing a character with the same insecurities or struggles that you have and seeing them overcome them. It gives you something very important. It can give you hope. When you can somehow make a great movie that becomes so culturally significant and successful, and then you do that again, but even better, you know you have a true masterpiece. And coming in at second place for our silver medal is Kung Fu Panda 2. Similar to Shrek 2, Kung Fu Panda looks at its predecessor and says, yeah, let's do that again, but even better. I think some high praise should be given to Jennifer Yu Nelson, the first woman and Asian American to direct a major animated film. Kung Fu Panda 2 does everything a good sequel should. It goes without saying that the animation was improved, and while I still think 3 has the best animation, this one has my favorite look, with the heavy tones of red permeating throughout the movie. The Kung Fu fights are as incredible and enjoyable as the first film, with the set pieces being even bigger. It's also nice to see Poe and the Furious Five as actual friends, and that while he is still himself, they do respect and care for him. It still has that signature goofy comedic sense of humor that endures us to the characters, even with a much darker tone. I mean, we introduced genocide to this universe within the first 5 minutes, with my personal favorite DreamWorks villain, Lord Shen, voiced by the talented Gary Oldman, who brings this charismatic and sadistic energy to the character. Lord Shen's design somehow made a peacock both menacing and bad, while still really scary, even though he still gets some funny lines without it seem forced or disrupting the flow of the scene.
Greetings, Panda. We meet at...
Hey, how you doing?
Hey. A little to the left.
Oh, but it's so heavy, Master.
30 years I've waited for this moment. Everything must be exactly how I envisioned it. And I envisioned it a little to the left. Perfect. With the weapon by my a little bit more.
He is much more of an emotional and mental threat towards Poe, which has been something that all except 4 have done, with each villain representing a different type of threat for Poe to overcome. Lord Shen is one of the most evil villains, committing genocide in order to avoid his destiny, but straight out of the first movie,
one often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it.
He believes that he is destined to rule all of China, and that when his parents exiled him from the city that they hated him, when in fact doing so still broke their hearts. Even though he did this horrible thing, they still loved him, and it broke their hearts to see him go down this dark path.
So your parents can rest in peace.
My parents hated me. Do you understand? They wronged me. And I will make it right.
They loved you. They loved you so much that having to send you away killed them.
The dead exist in the past, and I must attend to the future.
Even with all this skill, wealth, and power, we see how Shen is still insecure about his fate. And even when preparing to meet Poe, we see him practicing, because for as dangerous as he still is so set on his past that it ends up being his downfall, which he does eventually accept. Poe's journey in this film is the main reason why this movie is one of the few movies that I legit will cry when I watch. Yes, Kung Fu Panda 2 makes Cameron cry. There are a lot of great scenes in this movie, but I have to say the best one is when Poe finds the village he grew up in and discovers why his mom put him in that radish container.
It's enough to make a grown man cry. And that's okay. You go right ahead, dear.
And this is the scene where I cry, and I continue to cry when the soothsayer says this to him.
Your story may not have such a happy beginning, but that doesn't make you who you are. It is the rest of your story, who you choose to be.
We get to choose who we want to be, and we decide if we want to hold on to the past, or we can let it go because it doesn't define us. Whether it be mistakes or even to a lesser extent trauma, I don't think we should forget these things because they happen, and to forget them is to forget what we can learn from them. But we can't let them hold us back from our future and who we are now. And that's what Poe realizes. Despite the traumatic beginning to his story, it's still going, and what he has now is what's important. He was finally able to find inner peace.
I know who I am.
You do?
I'm your son. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son.
And coming in as the #1 DreamWorks animated movie winning the gold medal of this arbitrary video is...
There are many lawyers. I could give you many books. There are books that are written on how the election was rigged.
Yes, dear viewer, this was a rigged competition from the start. Because not only is How to Train Your Dragon my favorite DreamWorks movie of all time, not only is it my favorite animated movie of all time, but it is my favorite movie of all time. My senior year, I wrote a 10-page essay on the editing for this film alone. That should show how much I love this movie. This was the only movie where I knew the exact placement for it. I did say this was my ranking, but in all fairness, I don't think people wouldn't see why this could be #1. I don't think review sites are that reliable, but to give an idea of what audiences and critics think with How to Train Your Dragon, it's number 15 on Rotten Tomatoes for the top 300 movies and number 200 on IMDb's top 250 list. These are two lists I've considered every single movie ever made, and they still made it on. It's pretty easy to see why everyone loves this movie. The animation, especially the flight scenes, are some of the best use of 3D and best cinematography in a film. I personally think that the 3D here is better than in Avatar. Even when you're not watching it in 3D, you still feel like you're thousands of feet in the air. Part of what makes the flying scenes so incredible is just the music in general, which enhances every scene it's playing. John Powell's score is my favorite and one of the reasons he is among one of my favorite film composers in the industry. All the designs are iconic, both the human characters and of course the dragons. The story is a bunch of cliches, but done in a unique and interesting way. It's not the story you're telling, it's how you tell it, and How to Train Your Dragon does tell it in a refreshing way. What helps keep the story so refreshing are the characters, because they feel like real people despite being in this fantastical world. The banter and dialogue are full of wit and heart. Hiccup and Stoick's relationship especially feels real, with a parent not understanding their kid but still loves him even if he doesn't know how to show it. Even when Stoick rejects Hiccup, it visually affects him, just like any real person. You understand why characters act the way they do, and you're able to sympathize with where they are coming from even if you yourself don't necessarily agree with them. Honestly, there's so much about this movie that I love that I will be making a separate video for it. When will that happen? Who knows? I always imagine it as being one of the final videos of this channel, but I don't have any plans on that happening anytime soon. I believe that How to Train Your Dragon is objectively one of the best animated movies of all time, both in terms of writing and technical skills, which is why I decided to place How to Train Your Dragon as the #1 DreamWorks movie.
The only upsides are the pets. While other places have ponies or parrots, we have dragons.
And that brings us to the end of this video. Even though I did have to sit through a lot of mediocrity and garbage, I'm glad I did it because it made the great films that much better. When DreamWorks takes risks, just like anything in life, sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But the risks are worth it because we get to see films like Megamind, Kung Fu Panda, and Shrek, even if we get a Shark Tale, Spirit Untamed, and Trolls to match them. Because at the end of the day, DreamWorks is always going to have failures and successes, but that doesn't change the fact that they have made some of the most influential animated films of all time, and I certainly wouldn't have my love for film and storytelling without them. DreamWorks is very special to me. I've talked about it before in the other video I did, but the characters of DreamWorks have always been the most iconic and greatest parts of these movies. Maybe they have a camera always watching people, but I don't think it's a coincidence that these characters are depicted having the same insecurities that we have. These creators are telling the stories and characters that are personal to them, and that's something that's really comforting. At the end of the day, this list doesn't really mean much to most people because it's my ranking that fits me based on my life and who I am. I'm sure your list would probably be quite different, and that's a good thing. Everyone's going to be different, and at the end of the day, that's the beautiful thing about movies. They are art that speak to us individually for different reasons and impact us in ways we never thought possible. My name's Cameron. I hope you enjoyed this video. Spank all those buttons, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye. Hey, you're still around? Well, thank you for making it to the end of this video. This was my longest scripted video to date, and something that I've been wanting to do for the better part of 2 years, so it has been quite a journey to get here, especially since I am a one-man team, but I do want to thank my friends that also helped me make this video possible, especially with the live action stuff. It really means a lot that you've watched to this point, so thank you, and I hope you had a great day and enjoyed the video.